You thought you could marry my son? Your standards don't match ours. Don't you dare dream of joining us. Anyway, the point is you're not the right person for my son. Now leave." That's how coldly my father-in-law spoke to me. My mother-in-law joined in, saying, "You only approached Jake for money anyway." My name is Jessica. I'm 35 years old and I work for a company. Since graduating from university, I've been at the same job for years. Some of my coworkers left to start their own businesses, get married, or have children. But I stayed and devoted myself to my work every day. You might think I'm a lonely workaholic, but I'm not, because I have a boyfriend named Jake. Jake was a business partner. I thought he was a nice young man who took his work seriously. As we worked together, we started to like each other. He confessed his feelings for me, and we started dating. It's been a few years since we started dating, and now we're even engaged. But if you ask me if I'm not worried about marrying him, I have to admit that I am. He's younger than me, and I wonder if he's okay with our age difference, even though he says it doesn't matter. By the way, his father is a business owner, and Jake works for his father's company. This means that one day, Jake will take over the company and become its president. I was worried that his parents would oppose our marriage. I'd been feeling uneasy about it for a long time. Of course, I was happy when he asked me to marry him, but I wondered if we could really get married. However, Jake didn't seem to mind at all. His optimism was one of the things I loved about him. He had already met my parents, and we often had nice dinners together. My parents agreed that we should get married, and they liked Jake very much. Finally, the day came to meet Jake's parents. I had been so nervous about it for weeks. Their house was spectacular, just as I expected for the president of a company. It was so big that it felt like a royal palace. As soon as we arrived, I started to worry if my clothes were appropriate for the occasion. I had picked out nice clothes, but I wasn't sure if they were good enough. I'm from a normal family, so Jake's world felt very different from mine. Jake would take me to fancy restaurants and book expensive hotels for our vacations. He thought that sort of thing was normal, but it made me feel like he lived in a different world. Even so, he never pushed his values on me or bragged about being rich. I don't judge people by their money. I fell in love with you because of your personality and inner beauty, he would say. At first, I wondered why he was dating an older and ordinary woman like me. But his sweet words made me believe he truly loved me for who I am. Because we love each other deeply, Jake and I are getting married. I feel like I've met a wonderful man, and I want his parents to approve of our marriage. Don't worry, babe. I've already told my parents about you, he said to encourage me. Then the front door opened, and his mother welcomed us. Welcome, you must be Jessica. Yes, I'm Jessica. Nice to meet you. His mother gave me a quick nod and let us in. The living room was huge, and Jake's father was there, sitting on a big luxurious sofa, waiting for us. I felt nervous all of a sudden. Meeting his mother made me nervous, but his father was even more intimidating, as you'd expect from the president of a company. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. My name is Jessica. Thank you for inviting me today, I said, my voice shaking. Jake looked at me and smiled. Don't be so nervous. But his parents weren't smiling. They were staring at me with very cold eyes. I felt a chill down my spine. Please sit down, his father said, pointing to the sofa. It felt like a job interview. Well, no, excuse me, his father said as soon as I sat down. His mother agreed with him. Hey, Mom, Dad, what are you doing? What do you mean, no? It's rude to say such a thing, Jake said, upset, trying to defend me. But his parents didn't seem to listen. How old are you anyway? You look pretty old to me, his father asked. I'm 35, I replied. You're 5 years older than Jake. How can we accept Jake marrying an older woman like you? His mother said. Besides, it's already too late for you to have children, isn't it? We need someone who can give us grandchildren. I think it has to be a young woman, at least younger than Jake. I knew they would mention my age. And you're single at your age? I can't help but think you have some kind of problem. Maybe you're too difficult or have a bad personality or something like that, his mother added. Mom, what are you talking about? Jessica is a wonderful person with a great personality, Jake protested. Then why hasn't she married before? His mother shot back. Excuse me, I said. I know I'm a little older to be married, but I love my job and wanted to work hard. I've always prioritized my work over marriage. That's why I didn't get married until now. It wasn't until I met Jake that I realized I wanted to get married. I was almost overwhelmed by the pressure from his parents. I tried my best to choose my words carefully, but their attitude didn't change at all. Working harder? It's not like the company you work for is a big one. Even if you work hard and get promoted, you don't get paid much, do you? I think you should focus more on making yourself more attractive as a woman. You know, it would be nice if you put in some effort. Yes, even at your age, you can still look better. Maybe some plastic surgery would help, his father said. Honey, that's too straightforward, his mother added. I saw his parents laugh for the first time, but it was only when they were making fun of us. I was so shocked and angry that I didn't know what to say. You thought you could marry my son? Your standards don't match ours. Don't you dare dream of joining us. Anyway, the point is you're not the right person for my son. Now leave, his father said coldly. My mother-in-law joined in. You would have approached Jake for money anyway. I don't know how you fooled my son, but you can't fool us too. That's enough. You guys can say whatever you want, but it's my life. I'll decide who I marry. Jake tried to defend me. I stopped him and said, I see. I understand how you feel, but it's quite rude of you to say such horrible things to me, especially since we just met. I don't care if you're richer or not. It's not important to me. But if I were to become rich, I definitely wouldn't want to be like you. I stood up and walked out. We don't need to have any more conversations. As I left their house, his father shouted, You've got to be kidding me. Don't you dare insult us, you beggar. We'll never allow you to marry my son. I don't want to be related to people like you anyway, I said. You're such a disgraceful person. I'd like to see the faces of the parents who raised a woman like you, his father fought back. I ignored him and left their house. Their attitude was just too much for me to handle. I walked outside, frustrated. Then Jake came running after me, looking worried. Jessica, I'm sorry. I never thought my parents would say something like that. It was horrible, but maybe it's a good thing we found out now. It would have been a lot more pressure if we got married in that situation. Anyway, I'm leaving them. I'm not taking over Dad's company. I'm quitting too. You shouldn't make such a decision in a rush, I said. I'm not rushing. I really do love you, Jessica. We didn't get together for money, so there should be no problem if I leave the house. Well, that's true, but let's go to your parents' house and tell them about this, he said, pulling my hand and starting to walk. My parents were surprised by our sudden visit, but they welcomed us warmly. While having tea, we told my parents what had happened. My father listened without saying a word. Jake, your father's company is called SpaceX, right? And your father's name is Henry Cavill. Yes, but why? That's what I thought. I see. Why don't we go with you to your parents' house now? Dad, what's going on? Because they said they wanted to see her face, right? Let's go show her face then, shall we? My father isn't the type to get provoked, so I was surprised by his reaction, but he was ready to go. So we had no choice but to go back to Jake's parents' house. This time, Jake's father answered the door, not his mother. You again, I won't forgive you, no matter how many times you come back. Whose daughter do you think you were talking to, Patrick? My father said. Jake's father looked at my father, rolling his eyes. It took him a few seconds to finally recognize something. Mr. Richard, is that you? You finally remembered. Your daughter means her father is me. That's right. She's my only daughter. We had her later in our marriage. By the way, how dare you insult my precious daughter? Have you forgotten what I told you back then for 2 years? No, you see, when you were arrested for smoking and drinking, you were even caught shoplifting. I covered for you and gave you a chance to become a better person, didn't I? I did everything I could so you could get a decent job. Didn't I teach you that no one can live alone, and we all need to support each other? And yet, as soon as your company became successful, you forgot all that, didn't you? I apologize for that, Jake's father said, now looking fragile, a complete change from before. If you want to be the president of a company, you need to treat people with compassion. Do you think you're better than others just because you're successful? Aren't you looking down on people when you shouldn't? Well, he seemed to understand what was being said. Dad, my boss always says his stomach hurts from stress. Are you harassing him? Jake asked. What are you talking about? I'm just pushing him hard because I expect better of him, his father said, starting to come unraveled. Just when I thought you'd finally come to your senses, you're back to your old self. You're a real pain, Patrick. First of all, I want you to apologize to my daughter for insulting her. Yes, I am sorry, Jessica, he said, bowing his head to me, prompted by my father. It seemed that the master-slave relationship from their student days was still hard to change. Honey, you should apologize to her as well, my father-in-law said to his wife. My mother-in-law bowed her head as well. I felt relieved that his parents apologized to me. Hey, I'm leaving this house and the company too, Jake said. His parents panicked. Wait a minute, if you leave, who's going to take over? Your father's right. You're the only one we have left. I'm sick of you controlling everything in my life, Jake replied. I covered for you and gave you your chance to become a better person, didn't I? My father said, his voice steady and strong. I did everything I could so that you could get a decent job. Didn't I teach you that no one can live alone, and we all support each other? And yet, as soon as your company is successful, you forgot all that, haven't you? Jake's father seemed taken aback, his previous arrogance gone. I apologize for that, he said, his voice trembling. The man who had been so intimidating just moments before now seemed fragile, a complete change from before. If you want to be the president of a company, you need to treat people with compassion, my father continued. Do you think you're better than others just because you're successful? Aren't you looking down on people when you shouldn't? Jake's father hesitated. Well, apparently he had an idea of what was being said. He knew my father was right, but pride kept him from admitting it fully. Dad, Jake spoke up, his voice filled with frustration. My boss always says his stomach hurts from stress. Are you harassing him? What are you talking about? I'm just pushing him hard because I expect better of him, Jake's father said, but his confidence was waning. He was starting to come unraveled under the pressure. My father looked at him with disappointment. Just when I thought you'd finally come to your senses, you're back to your old self. You're a real pain, Patrick. First of all, I want you to apologize to my daughter for insulting her. Jake's father looked at me, his face a mixture of shame and regret. Yes, I am sorry, Jessica, he said, bowing his head to me, compelled by my father's firm stance. It was clear that the power dynamics from their past were still deeply ingrained. Honey, you should apologize to her as well, Jake's father said to his wife, who nodded and bowed her head too. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as his parents apologized. It was a small victory, but it meant a lot. Hey, I'm leaving this house and the company too, Jake announced, his voice steady and resolute. His parents' eyes widened in panic. Wait a minute, if you leave, who's going to take over? His mother asked, her voice trembling. Your father's right, his mother added, desperation creeping into her voice. You're the only one we have left. Jake shook his head, his resolve unshaken. I'm sick of you controlling everything in my life. I've made my decision." My father stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "Patrick, it's time you learned that respect and kindness are more important than wealth and status. You've been given a chance to change. Don't waste it." With that, we left the house. Jake and I walked away together, leaving behind the toxic environment that had tried to tear us apart. It was the beginning of a new chapter for us, one where we could build a future based on love, respect, and mutual support. "I am going to start my own company and see how far I can go on my own," Jake declared. "And I'll marry Jessica as I promised. Thanks for everything." Jake bowed his head deeply to say goodbye to his parents. Their faces turned completely pale and they froze in shock. Despite their reaction, we left them behind and walked away together. My father had been a high school teacher until he retired, and I had no idea that Jake's father was one of his former students. When I looked up the company Jake worked for on their website, I saw Patrick's picture. My father had told me that he had a student who became successful, but he never mentioned who it was. At first, my father was happy to see that one of his students had achieved something great. He always believed in hard work and integrity. "You can't be blinded by money and forget what's important," he used to say. My father was a dedicated teacher, always strict about values like honesty and humility. Jake followed through on his promise. He quit his job and started his own business. I supported him while continuing to work at my own job. Jake had a natural talent for being a business owner, and his company started making a profit early on. I was proud of him and happy to see his success. We got married, just as we had planned, and became husband and wife. We lived joyfully every day, supporting and loving each other. Our life together is filled with happiness and mutual respect. As for my father-in-law, his story took a different turn. Some of his employees sued him for harassment, which caused the company's stock price to drop significantly. As a result, he was dismissed from his position as president. It was a harsh reminder that no matter how successful you are, treating people with respect and kindness is essential. Seeing how things turned out for Jake's father made me even more grateful for my own father. My father taught me the importance of humility and compassion. He was a role model who lived with integrity and dignity, and I strive to live my life by those same principles. Now, Jake and I focus on building a life together, filled with love and mutual support. We work hard, enjoy our time together, and always remember the values that truly matter. Please subscribe to our channel if you like our story. We'll see you in the next video.